we are being joined again by Maria DeVries, and at this point in time, we'll allow public comment if anyone is.
It's Devery, Every with the D.
I'm sorry, Maria. I got Maria right this time at least.
Rhymes with Every.
I'll work on that last name for you.
Thank you.
But anyway, yes, if there's any public comment, we would allow that right now. It's only comment only, not for debate or discussion, but please feel free. The floor is yours if you'd like.
I'm just here to listen to you guys today.
Okay, very good. Anyone have anything else before we get started on the agenda? I guess not. Okay, welcome. We'll get this thing started. We'll go right down through the agenda. Starting with ABC, the mask policy. Let me bring that right up here. Actually, John, did you want to share that on the screen or?
I probably can share it on the screen, but it's going to take me a minute to get there.
Well,
did it get sent out again, or is it just referring back to the board packet?
I sent it out again today.
Okay.
yeah, you said that was the correct version, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Here we go. Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
All right, let's see if I can do this.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, if you could just enlarge that just a little bit for us, John, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm working on that too.
Okay.
Not quite. Oh, here we go. How's that?
That works for me. Everyone else can see that. So the changes as suggested are highlighted in blue. And that we were going to give John the leeway to make on-the-spot decisions, of course, notifying the board and relevant personnel and parents, of course, of the school board, of the district, of any changes he needs to make. And we, of course, would review those. Anyone have any discussion on that change?
Well, John, yeah, I mean, I do want to process this a little more, I guess, because how would that, I mean, what scenario would cause you, John, to want to make a tweak? Can you give me an example of, I mean,
I would say if cases went way down, we weren't experiencing much transmission at all locally or even statewide, that we could probably relax some of those masking requirements.
Can I give an example too, John?
Go ahead.
So you'll notice in the policy under where it says face coverings in the second paragraph, it says face coverings for staff and students are required at all times, including buses, with the exception of eating with 6 foot distancing, outdoor recess when students are able to physically distance by 6 feet, and during brief mask breaks between class periods. So outdoors, when we started the school year, we weren't requiring masks to be worn outdoors, but that word recess might be troubling. There might be other times when students can safely distance 6 feet outdoors, like within classrooms, a classroom setting, for example, a teacher's taking a class outside and they can safely distance, or doing a lesson outside with a really small group of students and they can safely distance. So just that one word recess could potentially pose an issue for us.
So I guess what I'm wrestling with is, is not so much about that as just about, to me, a policy is kind of black and white, and this is the board's statement about something. So basically what we're saying is this is the board's policy unless the superintendent decides to do something different. And not that I don't, have great faith in our superintendent. It's not about that, but I just think that I wrestle with a board establishing a policy and then saying, well, if somebody else decides that this isn't really the thing to do, then we'll just skip it, right? So I'm having a hard time with that.
Well, what if we were to put a language in there that this decision will be reviewed at the next full board meeting so that we could all get on the same page? If we were, if something were to happen, let's say we're having a full board meeting tonight, and then the next 2 days we have this huge spike. I don't think we can wait a full month before John.
Right.
allowed to do
No, I
it.
get that. I think that I understand that that's the intent behind this, is things are changing pretty rapidly and we maybe can't wait till the next board meeting. So,
So if we were to put something,
I think we're gonna have to just live with that, but I just,
unless we were to put a sentence in there saying this decision will be reviewed at the next full board meeting, something to kind of maybe allay your concerns, but I
or
can't.
ratified or something like that, so. I don't know. John, I hope you understand my point. And it's not that I don't have faith in you. It's that, this is a policy is the board's opportunity to have something definitive to say. And I just get worried when we make it less definitive. So
Tom, I do understand. I absolutely do. In fact, this whole discussion came up when this policy was first adopted. Because if you recall, this was adopted at the behest of the Teachers Association, who were very concerned that they wanted to have masking in policy as they felt it was more enforceable in policy.
right.
And we tried to explain that it's not as simple as that, because masking as such does not cover all exigencies that would come from operating a school system during the pandemic. And, you're right, and so is Mark. So I don't know exactly how to balance that, except to say that, I'm happy to let the board, or I'm happy to have the board make as much of a decision as they would like, but I fear that putting it to the board in every such instance is going to be kind of onerous and probably not very expedient in terms of what we need to do to operate the schools.
How about if we, as the policy committee, just simply know that we can look at changing the policy if John had to make something so substantive that we really need to change the policy to reflect it? Because I think he needs to have that ability immediately and on the fly. And we need to have the ability, if need be, to make changes to the policy. I think we can. I mean, the second sentence, it says he will notify us and the public of any changes. And that works for me. And then we can decide, us on the committee, Mark, really need to go in and make the policy reflect it, because it's such a big deal. And it's, until the pandemic is over, but we need to change it. I don't think we have to change it, this sentencing, in other words. I think we can just simply say, at any time, for any reason, the policy committee is going to make a change to policy because we feel we should.
I'm comfortable with the way as it reads now, but I want to make sure Tom's concerns are addressed.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the only thing I might suggest is that we just add that it's, again, I'm not suggesting that John wouldn't do this, but I think we have to write policies that are not, specific to who's in any particular office at this time. So I just think we should say something about notifying the board maybe at the next, I put a time frame on it, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is what, should it be, and I know you're going to do this anyway, John, but within, couple of business days or at the next regularly scheduled meeting or whatever, I don't know. It just feels like that needs to be in there.
So that last sentence that says, on such instances, the superintendent shall notify the board and the public of such changes. How would you like that to read? In a timely fashion by the next business meeting?
Well, I mean, I think in reality, if you made such a change, you're going to send out a family letter, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what you do, right? So, and you do already notify the board. So I wouldn't want to put anything in here that would be, too onerous on you, but I think that it's realistic and in keeping with what you're already doing to say that it would be that the board and the public would be notified within, 2 or 3 business days or something like that. So that, because if you're going to make a change like that, you have to notify people anyway, so they know that things are changing. So.
Right. Typically, we notify at bare minimum, 24 hours. And a lot of times what we'll do is notify on a Friday, so people have the weekend to process and get ready for any kind of a change. So I'm perfectly happy with some kind of a reasonable.
Yeah, let's just say within 3 business days or something like that. So I know I'm being a pain in the neck policy geek here, but I just want to get it right,
I'm fine with that. That's plenty of time for me because you know how I operate.
Yep. Yeah, and you already would exceed that, but I just think that, take the people out. What we ought to say in the policy is put a time frame on it.
Yeah.
So
I'm good.
Okay.
Anything else with that one, or are we kind of
Um,
done with that one?
I'm good with that. And what about the next change?
I'm fine with that too.
yeah, I guess the only caveat would be, if there is, state or federal guidance that would preclude that, right? But I guess we cross that bridge when we come to it.
Right. Well, state or federal mandates would supersede any policy anyway.
Right. Yep.
So, yeah.
Didn't we have a question during our board meeting about naming how board members should operate within this policy or board meetings or something, or?
The school board and staff are really the same. Now, the thing is that if we're meeting in person, you'd have to be physically distanced at least 6 feet apart and vaccinated, according to what I understand, to have remove a mask. And even then, I question the wisdom in that, I guess. I think probably for the board meeting in person, at least in my opinion, you'd be better off to be masked, even though most of us, I think, or if not all of us, are vaccinated. But absent a board meeting, your board members are just like the public. You're a member of the public. So going into a building, visiting a school, whatever, you're under the same guidelines as the general public.
Okay. Well, in case we're asked that question at our next board meeting, let's just have that answer. We are considered the public if we're going into schools. And if we're meeting together, we're considered like staff.
Correct. So you'd have to observe the physical distancing, you'd have to make sure everybody's vaccinated and so forth.
Okay. Everybody else okay with that?
Yep, I'm good with that too. So we're going to make a change to that first correction there, and that'll be ready for the board at the next meeting.
Second reading?
Right.
Okay.
I'll just editorialize a little bit that it would be great if we could pass this at the next meeting without tabling it yet once again.
Okay,
Okay.
Anything else?
got that.
All right, let me
Very
stop
good.
my screen share.
Okay.
All right.
Next on the agenda is GCOC, evaluation of administrative staff. John, can we bring that up by any chance?
Probably.
By the way, Janet, Pete, hello to you guys today. I haven't had a chance to say hello yet. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you doing?
How's your daughter doing?
Erin is doing very well. She fits in very nicely at her college.
Great to hear. Great. Great,
Hmm.
great.
What happened to Steve Betts?
He got bored.
Like- Wow. Okay.
We bored him out. I don't know why, because policy is just crazy and incredibly engaging stuff, right? So
Riveting stuff. It is.
riveting, that's the word I was looking for. Here you go. How your kids doing, Pete?
They're pretty good. Grayson was home for the weekend from NSSM. They're all kind of getting used to being at school again.
Things fairly normal at MSSM?
As normal as anything can be these days, but yeah, they're back doing a regular schedule. They're home every once a month for a weekend. They're doing pool testing up there, which is kind of reassuring after when 140 kids are all part of one pool and they can have a negative.
Yep.
And makes those bus rides easier, and they're still following the same operating procedures we are.
But they're in dorms, so they probably have certain policies and dorms are following that.
Yeah, the policies are more like the college policies.
Right.
They have to have a certain percentage of the rooms have to be dedicated empty for COVID. They've got so it's an interesting public high school.
Yeah.
With those rules.
Yeah. Yep.
And they share an element. Their academic building is in the elementary school for Limestone.
Yep.
Oh,
So they
For
share
what-
a building.
Kitty, please.
For whatever reason, this is not coming up on my computer.
Okay.
It was sent to all of you. It was sent to me as well, but it's just not coming up. I don't know why.
Okay, well, I'll just try to pull it up here. It's nice that, I mean, if we're all sitting around the same table in person, then we can all sit there and look at the same document at the same time. That's all I'm trying to do by having you put it up on the screen here.
Well, Mark, do you have it? Because I mean, maybe I think John could make you a co-host, which would allow you to share.
I'm looking at it right now.
Can do that.
I don't know how to do co-hosting, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Yeah, hang on, I'll do that.
Lauren, how is Ella doing?
fine.
You are now a co-host, Mark, and you can share.
Okay.
Finding it difficult to be COVID restricted, but it's life.
Yep.
hold on now. So now that I'm a co-host, what happens now? How do I share a,
You
So
go,
you should have green share screen down at the bottom in your bottom menu.
got, okay, so I bring this, bring the
Click
thing up.
that and then pick the one you want to share.
Yes. That's the important part, is picking the document on your screen you actually want to share with the group.
And
Yeah,
don't
versus
pick
one you
anything you
don't
don't
wanna
want to share.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that,
Good
guys.
chance at that one.
And sorry, I don't have this either.
Not
And I
doing it.
lost my Zoom.
So I apologize. I stepped away for a minute, but what is it that we're looking for here?
GCOC,
Ah,
and yeah, I can't share this. I'm not sure how to share this, and I don't want to burn up anyone else's time. If we want to just, if everyone just wants to pull it up, that's fine with me.
I think Stephanie just shared the link, maybe.
Yeah, you can put it in, I just put it in the chat box and you can pull it up on your screens from there.
gotcha.
Oh, look at
I
that.
just wasn't sure if any, that's the original that John and I had worked on when we submitted it to this group last time. I don't think any changes were made, but anyways, it is what it is.
Oh, yeah, I don't have it. I mean, I'm not able to share this.
If you have anybody who has a new device, there's some settings you have to change and you have to update Zoom before it will let you share on the new device.
Okay, that would be me.
So the Google Doc I just shared is exactly what we presented to the policy committee last time. I don't believe the policy committee made any changes to what we presented, which is what went to the board for first reading.
Okay. Let me find this. GCOC.
all right, now I've got it, finally.
You got it, John?
I think so. Okay. Now let me minimize this so I can get back to here. Yeah,
Well, thank you, John.
yeah, I don't know why it was just being real difficult, but now I have all the policies
Okay, thank you.
finally on my MacBook. So really, the only change with this is, as you see, and it's just to reflect that we are using a different system of evaluation, which is based on the Marzano model for administrators, which is
Okay.
similar to the same model that we use for teachers.
Yep.
Any discussion on that?
Nope.
I think remember we kind of bantered around about this at the last meeting, so I don't think there's anything too mysterious about how this works, right?
The major thing at the last meeting was, for whatever reason, the board wasn't sent a copy of the
forms that we're going to be
evaluation
completed.
forms and the evaluation procedure, which we want to just rescind because they don't really belong in policy.
Right.
Those are developed by the Office of the Superintendent. And if we put it in policy, then you're locked into using the same form and exactly the same procedure until such time as it's changed.
And did you tell us, or Stephanie told us, that those were outdated, or you weren't really going according to those forms? Or
yeah, they're completely outdated.
Right. So they need to go.
Right. You'll see at the bottom of this one that's on the screen right now that it's a whole new chapter and there's all new language within that chapter. It's now chapter 180.
Okay, okay. Well, I'm happy with this and we can go forward with this before the full board at the next meeting.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
so noted. John, if you could bring up GCOC-F, that's one of the ones we're going to rescind, correct?
Hang on now, that one you want up, GCOC. Hang on.
Yeah, it's the second one down on the right.
On the right column, second
Oh,
one down.
sorry. Yep, thank you. Don't know my right from my left, apparently.
Yeah, so that's just the form, the evaluation form, and we don't need to know about that. That's,
It
Yeah,
It
that's,
doesn't fit what we use currently.
and that gets in micromanaged territory. We don't need to do that.
And this is the procedure, GCOCP. That's the procedure.
And those were sent out to the full board the day after, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Everyone should have time to look these over. So we will just briefly go over these with the board, just to let them know this is what we were talking about last month, and we'll present that and vote on rescinding both F and P, correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's second reading. Okay, I'm
thank you.
good, unless there's something else.
DJ, purchasing requirements.
Oh, sorry, I had one more thing. Aren't we also rescinding, did we have GCOCF? There were 3 things that we were planning to rescind.
Yeah, we just looked at that.
Oh, did you get that?
Yeah,
we left at F and
GCOCF we had up,
Okay,
which is that one,
And GCOC,
and GCOCP.
how about the one above it, GCOC?
well, that's the one we're just tweaking.
That's the one we're changing.
yeah.
Here's the one we're changing.
Oh,
And then this one and this one,
We're
we're
going
gonna,
away.
we're gonna rescind.
right,
Okay.
but weren't there also, I know that there were 3.
there were 3.
Wasn't there also procedures for the teacher evaluation process that we were rescinding as well?
Ooh,
I thought they were, but the problem was it didn't get it. We talked about it in the last meeting. But it didn't go on the board agenda for whatever reason. I don't know why. We could certainly do it. I mean, we could put it on this meeting and bring it for first to look, just to rescind, because that's all we're doing with it. I don't have it. Unless I go to policy, which I can do, I suppose.
well, if we can just make sure that goes to the board beforehand so they can review it. I mean, was it these 3 things? So the third thing that Stephanie's talking about has not been sent to the full board?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, if we can make sure that Kathy can send that out prior to the next meeting, just to let them know.
Yeah, it's an outdated procedure, I believe, just like the admin procedure. Isn't that correct, Stephanie?
And I don't think anyone had any problems with that. I think member Kiata and I think Chelsea were hesitant about rescinding something they haven't laid their eyes on. So we can at least make sure that third thing gets before the full board. So that way we can just go through the formality of
All right.
rescinding it.
If the committee's okay with that, I'll make sure it gets on the business item on the agenda and
Yep.
send
Yeah.
out.
Okay, it was on the agenda at the last board meeting.
What? Okay.
To rescind the following policies, RSU 13 policy GOCAP, professional staff evaluation procedure.
All right.
Then policy GCOCF, administrator evaluation form, and GCOCP, administrator evaluation procedure.
Well,
Yep.
presented, but I think Chelsea, if I remember correctly, wasn't able to find the actual document. Or
Yeah, it
Well,
was,
whatever.
right. It wasn't provided to the board in advance. So as long as
Right.
we do that, so.
Okay.
so we can do that, then we'll be golden for the meeting. They just want to put their eyes on it. I think we made our case why it should be rescinded, but they were just uncomfortable with something they hadn't laid their eyes on. So
Okay.
I would agree with them on that. Okay, DJ purchasing requirements. Now we're back on track here.
All right, that's currently up on my screen, and
Very good.
this is Peter's area of expertise. Is he still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. So if you recall, this was a policy that we had to change to be compliant with changes in federal statutes based on the Federal Grant Management Handbook. We rushed it through. We got it done in one meeting. Not something we like to do, but the board did do it to make it so to allow us to be compliant, but we promised that we would come back and actually go through and review the policy through the Finance Committee, and then the Finance Committee would then recommend a policy to the Policy Committee, and that's where we are now. When we really reviewed DJ, there was just things that we didn't really understand. It was a little confusing. I think it's probably one of those policies that was an amalgamation of SAD 5 and 50, and they were kind of combining policies at some point. That's when it was passed. So we met last week as a Finance Committee. We had our attorney from Denver Woodsum with us to review the policy. She's an expert in this. She actually wrote the MSMA draft policy. And so we thought we would maybe one approach would be starting from scratch. And so that's what we did. Although scratch really isn't very far from where we were, especially when it comes to this first part, the introduction, part 1, bidding and purchasing required by law. That is exactly the same as the current policy was passed. Where the changes are is when we outline in part 2. You can go down to the next page, John. This is bidding and purchasing not required by law. So this would be local purchasing not paid by state or federal money. And so there's a couple of pieces of this. This part outlines when this policy actually kicks in. And so we will use a couple different processes, either competitive bidding or RFP process for purchases over $100,000. That's the threshold that we'll use. And then the superintendent will make the decision as to what process we will use based on what's best for the school system. And I'm gonna back up a second. None of these purchases are going to be a surprise. These are our purchases that are planned purchases. They're budgeted purchases. We're throwing around a lot of big numbers, and it seems like that it just gives the superintendent a lot of leeway, but really this just outlines how we buy things that are already budgeted or planned. The board will be well aware of any purchases in this, especially any purchase over $100,000. The board will be pretty aware of that well in advance. And this just outlines how we go about getting the best price for the taxpayer. So 2 just outlines the threshold. The threshold here is $100,000. And then 3 goes through the process of the competitive bid process, the procedure, as well as the RFP procedure. Those are the same as they were in the current policy. The section that we wanted to make sure that we had in there that seemed to be a concern, I think rightfully so, is how we make the awards and what threshold does the policy give certain people or committees or board the right to make those awards. So this kind of outlines the dollar amount thresholds that outline who will actually authorize the award to be made by the superintendent. The first thing that the committee wanted is they wanted to make sure that, you know, if time wasn't of the essence, then the board would make the decision. You know, the board would get the feedback. The board would actually have the time to do that. And that was kind of a, you know, a suggestion by the finance committee. It wasn't, you know, mandated. It was just something they thought that the policy committee should consider. So that's what A comes from, number 4A. When time is not of the essence.
You scroll down there, John.
Go down, scroll down one more page. On page 4, top of page 4.
There we go.
But yeah, so these are the two areas that the finance committee had input on. 4, especially when time is not of the essence and for contract amounts greater than $100,000, the board at its next meeting shall vote to make the award. That gives the board input on non-time sensitive purchases. It allows them input as to the award. At all other times, and this is the more standard part, this was kind of taken a little bit from the old policy, but we just kind of try to make it more clear. This is just the award piece of this. When the total contract is less than $50,000, the superintendent shall make the award and notify the board. When the total contract is between $50,000 and $250,000, a majority of the finance committee membership shall authorize the superintendent to make the award. So that gets the committee involved and at least a portion of the board to authorize that award. Again, the purchase member has been authorized well in advance through the budget process. And then anything over $250,000, the board shall make the award, whether it's time sensitive or not. And that was a suggestion of the committee. All 3 members that were there thought these were good thresholds. And so they just wanted to put that in front of the policy committee for them to debate if necessary. And the other piece that they wanted to make sure is that there were some exemptions that were in the old policy that seemed to make sense. Tuition we pay to some private or public schools for regular or special ed. Sometimes they are in that neighborhood of over $100,000. Products and services procured through a regional group purchasing group. That's generally our food service. We do that. Utilities. We spend a lot with utilities, obviously with 7 buildings, as well as just some contractors that we work with that could, over the course of a year, be over $100,000. For something like Siemens, that's about $130,000 a year, so that wouldn't be going to bid anyway. And then just any vendor that, over the course of a year, we would spend more than $100,000 on. And these are pretty standard language. The attorney was on board with all these changes. And the finance committee unanimously put this forward to the policy committee. If I rush through something, please let me know and I can go back. But again, there's 3 pieces in my mind. First, these are not surprise purchases. This does not give anybody the ability to just go buy something and circumvent budgeting and regular controls that we have in place. 2, it outlines the threshold that we actually look to do RFPs or competitive bidding. And 3, it outlines how the awards are made and who makes the award based on the contract amount if time is of the essence. Otherwise, the board is involved almost every time.
I'm really glad the finance committee went through this and made its recommendations to us. It's great. We're confident with that.
I'm happy with this. Can anyone else have anything they want to add?
Looks good.
Okay, so we'll bring this before the board at the next meeting, as is. Okay, John, if you could bring up DJH. Purchasing.
DJH actually had no changes, so you can actually scratch that one.
Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. There we go. We're scratching DJH.
This is the red line that was actually approved at the meeting, I guess 2 meetings ago. So this just added the board members to the conflict of interest policy.
Oh, okay.
And so we didn't even we didn't have time really to go into this part of it. There was nothing there was really nothing very confusing about it. So there's no changes to this policy right now.
Okay. So we are bringing this before the board next meeting, or we're not?
Does not need to go. It's already policy.
It's already done. Okay, so we can scratch that. Okay, then, so we go on to the policies regarding use of physical restraint, JKAA.
Maria, I'm impressed you're still with us. Takes a lot of perseverance to stay with this stuff.
I really wanted to hear what you guys have to say about restraints, so.
Oh, okay. 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 See you, Pete.
Hi, Pete. We might need to make it a little bit bigger. John, you're muted. Okay.
Okay, how's that? I want it a little bigger.
Yep.
Please, if you mind, thank you. Perfect.
Okay, so I'll let Janet chime in a second, but there's been a change in the law with use of physical restraint and seclusion. And Janet attended, I believe, a workshop with Drummond and Woodson with regard to that. So she has the knowledge of the change in the policy that I do not at this point. So Janet, are you still with us?
Yes, I am still with you, and I've just unmuted myself.
Okay.
Yep. So basically, this new law will take effect October 13th. And what they've done is they've basically just changed some of the definitions of what physical restraint and seclusion are, so
Okay.
that those definitions are included in this. I'm trying to see if I can read it on my screen. And then, so that definitely changes how we're actually going to be, not when we're doing restraint or seclusion, because that's always the last option. That's only something we do when there's no other option that we can have, and when there's, a risk of serious harm. What it does do is it increases the amount of paperwork, the amount of reporting that we would need to do for those cases. So procedurally, there's some differences as well. So in the definitions, there's differences. And then as a result of that, because before, where, for example, restraint would involve the whole body, like if the whole body was kept from moving, that would be considered restraint. They've changed the definition so it's arms, legs, head. So like deflecting a punch, for example, would now be considered a restraint.
Ah, okay.
What they've also, so again, that doesn't mean we're not going to do what needs to happen in order to protect or for safety. What it does mean is when we have to do that, we have to document it as a restraint.
Okay.
And those forms of documentation have not changed. So those are the same in the policy. The other thing that it does do, it does add a kind of a clause in the law, so that in certain cases,
Well, how would that work then? I mean, if you can't restrain the child, how is safety?
And that is why, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So yeah, how is safety implemented for the student or the staff?
So this would only be in extreme situations where, like, again, there's a medical plan, not a doctor's note, but there's a medical plan for that child. And in that case, it might involve a change in placement. It might involve having the child be in a more restrictive setting because of safety. But again, we would treat every case as an individual case. We would definitely invite doctors to be on, if it's an IEP student, we would invite them to be on our team. So we would be very cautious before making any kind of determination like that, because it is a safety issue, but that is written into the law.
Okay.
And I do have a training video that we did purchase from Drummond and Woodson. So part of this is staff training. So we have that we were able to provide for staff. I'm more than willing to share that with the board if they would like to watch it. And we do have some other informational sheets to kind of break this down because it is complicated. And we are still waiting for it to be, the policy to be written more clearly in legislation to kind of like, there are some instances where it could be argued that even blocking a punch would be a restraint. So definitely there's some things that we need to work out, but I feel like this policy, which was a template was given to us by Drummond and Woodson, does seem to cover all the bases. I've read it a few times.
Which staff will be trained?
So this is not a special ed law. So really, I think definitely all special ed staff will be trained. I think we're also planning to share this with principals and then have them decide what other staff in their buildings we feel should be trained, but probably everybody should be trained in this. And that's because again, if you're breaking up a fight, for example, some of the things that were exempt before are no longer exempt. So it just, again, you're still going to do what you need to do for the safety of this children that's permittable in this, but you may have to have an incident report filled out, and the procedure is still spelled out here clearly in this. It hasn't changed. That it has to be written up, and there's certain steps that have to be followed legally whenever restraint happens. So if you're deflecting that punch and that's a restraint, you have to do the paperwork. There's you have to notify the parents. You have to send that paperwork home to the parent. There has to be a debriefing with the student. There has to be a debriefing with the staff. And additionally, you have to have a written plan afterwards to try to reduce that behavior from happening again. So there are steps that need to be taken for anybody, general ed or special ed, if this happens.
And this is not a special ed policy.
No, it is not a special ed policy.
Yeah.
This is a school policy. So this applies to all students, all staff.
Right. So basically what's being recommended is that we scrap the entirety of our existing policy and replace it with what Drummond Woodson sent us.
Yes, because the definitions are very different. I do think that might be in the best interest of the school. So we don't have something in there that is not what was intended within the law.
The whole law has changed as of October 21st, you said, right?
Not the whole law, but very important definitions within that law that have changed. The procedure largely has stayed the same.
Okay.
And again, I'm more than willing to share that video with board members if they want to watch that video that it was provided, that I purchased through Drummond and Woodson, that really spells this out, very clearly in an hour and 7 minutes. So if anybody's interested in that, but I've also broken it down into like 2 pages of just like an overview.
I'd be interested in seeing either one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I would as
Trying to
well.
wrap my head around this a little bit. I know there's very specific things you are allowed and not allowed to do, and I have no concept of either, so that'd be nice to review that.
I can definitely share that. And again, and this is for student safety. So we are never going to do a restraint or a seclusion if there is any other option. And staff are all being trained in this. And we are also, our BCBAs are doing this training ongoing every year. So.
When you say seclusion now, I read the definition of what a space for seclusion would be. Are those places already in place in our schools and all of our facilities?
We do have quiet, what we call quiet rooms that are seclusion rooms in some buildings, but I will just say that seclusion does not have to be in a room. So if you have a student that's within a designated space, so for example, we have safety mats that sometimes have been used in schools, and that student is in a space, a defined space, and there's nobody else in there with them, so they're alone, that is a seclusion. So seclusion does not necessarily mean in a room with the door shut by themselves. A seclusion could be they're in the room and somebody's just blocking the door, or the student doesn't feel like they can leave. And so all of those things have to be treated as a seclusion. And there are steps that have to be taken to determine if that's appropriate, because again, the definition is very clear about when that is and is not appropriate. And then we need to follow the steps.
I mean, I was curious, and again, this is the things I can't quite wrap my head around, is if if the student is left alone, you say it's not necessarily they're
Continuously monitored. You would never leave a student in a situation where they're not continuously monitored. It just means they're in that space.
Thank you. That's what I was
alone.
wondering. I wouldn't want them to harm themselves somehow.
Absolutely never. And then, and it was 10 minutes, if there's a seclusion for 10 minutes, admin has to be called in to determine if that should continue after that. But most of them are much, we have to, they're much shorter, because as soon as that imminent risk has passed, we need to stop that immediately.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think this will all probably be covered then in the training video and the other documents you could provide. I would like to review those. I'm sure that'd be interesting.
Yeah. And then if you have any questions, please reach out and I can do my best to answer them.
Thank you.
Just by the way, the policy that this is replacing was last approved in 2015. It's been a while.
Mhm.
The state law, Janet, or federal law that we're having to comply with.
State.
This is one of those areas where we do exactly what our lawyers tell us to do in terms of policy.
Mhm.
Just don't mess with it.
Does our first policy from 2015 need to be rescinded first, or it just simply takes the place of that one?
Well, I think I would adopt this policy at first reading. And then that would just basically overwrite the original policy, because it's the same, I think it's the same policy designation, if I'm correct. It is
It is.
the same policy designation. So if you adopted JKAA and it's this version at first reading, that means it supersedes JKAA from 2015.
Okay,
So you don't need 2 votes, in other words.
gotcha. Okay. Anyone else have any other questions or concerns?
So we're not gonna bring this to the board 2 times, is what you're saying?
No, I think you can.
Yeah.
But adopt it at first, just give it a first reading.
Mhm.
That will supersede JKAA on the books. And then it would be fully adopted at second reading.
Mhm.
Janet, will you be available at the next board meeting too? I'm sure people will have questions and you'll certainly be better prepared to answer those concerns and questions than any of us will.
Yeah, and I'll definitely send out this information to the board before that so that people have a chance to review it.
That's great.
And will you be available for questions as well? If,
Yeah, I go to all the board meetings, so I'll be
thank you.
there.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll be glad to pass the football to you on in this instance.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
We
I
did
will
with,
say, if it's an in-person board meeting, we're going to have to just do something with the audio, because with everybody masked at those board meetings, I have trouble hearing the questions. So we'll just have to either speak really loudly, or we're gonna have to pass around my live captioning device.
Okay, we'll do that.
Maybe we can the person asking the question can remove their mask just for the duration of the question. We have the plexiglass around us, so maybe that would be all right. Whatever people are comfortable with it at the board. Especially the low talkers amongst us.
There are a couple.
Yes, there are. Okay.
I've never been accused of that.
Tom, loud and clear, Pico.
Oh, God.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Does anyone else have any other discussion or communications they'd like to put forth? We're good. Okay, so we will see everyone at the next board meeting, and we'll present all these with the changes suggested.
So,
Thank you all.
we have a workshop tomorrow night, right?
That's true, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Well, then,
Yep.
thank you all very much, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody. See ya.
Here. Thank you, Maria.
Oh, John, if there's a better way for me to like send, can you hear me?
Hang on.
I figured, I was just gonna ask if you wanted me to send anything specific to people.
I just want to